Hello, my friends. Welcome to another Johnny Vedmore read through with me, your host, Johnny Vedmore. We're going to look at another one of my articles today, an exciting one. Well, exciting if you like this sort of thing. This article I wrote a while ago, and I wrote for UK Column rather than some of the other sites that I write for. And I really like the fact the UK column let me host and write a couple of articles for them. They use less graphics and media than I'm used to, and I like to use my own, make my own um, uh, cover photos and stuff for articles. So they don't do so much of that. So it's very basic. In that sense, it's rustic, and it's a really good exploration of something that wasn't really known, and it's looking into. And it came up in a recent article. Musk and Epstein, the third culture, which is about Musk's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. But this is called David Shaw and the Rise of Jeff Bezos. And Jeff Bezos, his rise was relatively unknown. Well, it wasn't unknown, everybody knew it. It just wasn't true. Yes, they like to make up their own narratives. They like to make up their own origin stories. And the origin of Amazon was Jeff Bezos and his wife. They get married. They go and they load up the car, but a car they bought off their his parents, and they go and they load it full of books, and they make this new bookstore called Amazon, and it becomes global all of a sudden. It's a bullshit story, really, an extremely bullshit story. Um, the reality of how Jeff Bezos and the rise of Amazon happened is much more. It's significant. It's significant because, a lot of the people who create such platforms need to know that such platforms need creating, and they need to co-opt it before anybody else has known it. So us down on the normal streets, we're making our websites, and we try and, well, we'll do a little website and we'll sell a few things and we'll try and get some sort of money together. Maybe we'll make it up to the next level. These guys from the start are like, let's undercut everybody, let's monopolize everything, let's cheat as much as possible, and let's use game theory, computer modeling, and other things to accurately decide what the future looks like and what future technology looks like, and then let's take control of it and not let anyone else near it. And in the 80s, there was something called Usenet that was around. It was an intranet internally used between universities. On there, a guy called Tim Berners-Lee announced the creation of the World Wide Web. And that really got going in the 90s. And they were already mapping out how to monopolize that before we even knew what the internet was or that it was coming. I mean, for most of us, maybe 14, 15, I was maybe 94, 95, 96, when I first got to use the internet, and it was like, wow, what is this? You could type in anything. I can't even imagine what I type in. It took years for us to for the internet to be normalized. By the time it was about probably the early noughties, you started to see, wow, look at the power of this. They'd already mapped that out before the internet had even opened up. Amazon.com created, download.com created, all of these big sites created by people who already saw the future. And that's what we deal with here on Newspaste, is we look at things where they look into the future. That's what I deal with. And so it was really nice for UK Column to host this article, and I think I should do a read through. Like I say, this is something that's going to come up again and again because at the end of the day, these people create the world we're living in. Now, you can still find this article on Newspace. Here's my site, Newspace. And if you go down to the other articles section, see there's a load of other articles there. You can go to David Shaw and the rise of Jeff Bezos. Like I say, it comes up during this piece here. Elon Musk, Musk and Epstein, the third culture dossier. And it comes up because this is about Musk's involvement in Edge, in Jeffrey Epstein funded organization. But there was someone else who was involved in Edge, actually more involved than Musk, which was Jeff Bezos. Completely loved it. And of course, here we go. Yeah, you can go, you can go to UK column, just type in Jeff Bezos. You'll find this easy enough if you want to. Links will be in the description, of course, if you want to read it. And that's David Shaw. And it'll all become obvious to you as we go along. And this is a UK column article. It's dated the 19th of September 2022 by me, Johnny Vedmore. It's got a read through there, basic read through, listen to the article there. And it's called, like I say, David Shaw and the Rise of Jeff Bezos by Johnny Vedmore. Jeff Bezos has spent decades creating a heroic backstory to the founding of Amazon. But when one investigates the truth behind the manipulated mythos, the narrative Bezos has written into the history books quickly falls apart. This article will investigate the powerful company behind the creation of Amazon, an entity which predicted the internet revolution years before Tim Berners-Lee had even announced the creation of the World Wide Web. We will examine the hedge fund, which installed its own recruits into the top positions within the sectors of the internet that had the most potential for making vast profits. The company in question monopolized large parts of the web before most people had even been online. This is the story of how D.E. Shaw and the rise of Jeff Bezos. Before the World Wide Web, there was no Amazon, Google, CNET, or eBay. While the vast majority of humans had no idea that the internet was going to become so all-encompassing, one large financial organization began, like nothing which had ever been before, to capitalize on its foreknowledge of the coming internet era. Even when the internet revolution had begun, most people didn't understand how these slow-loading web pages, limited in their functionality, could possibly end up having such comprehensive impact on every part of modern society. As the technologies which made the modern cyber realm possible took shape, there was a selection of powerful hedge funds and financial institutions which had begun to calculate the winners and losers of this newly forming technological era. One of the biggest of these players was a futuristic and one-of-a-kind financial institution, originally set up by a man named D.E. Shaw, PhD. This major mover and shaker of the internet revolution has remained relatively unknown to the many people who use the web today, and the extraction of Shaw from the annals of history is assuredly purposeful. D.E. Shaw and Company was more than just a hedge fund founded by a former professor. It was the company that co-opted the internet revolution and that began creating some of the giant monopolies which still dominate the online realm today. To understand the coordinated capitalization, manipulation, and monopolization that has characterized the digital world in our generation, we have to go back in time before the majority of us knew about the coming internet age. In doing so, we soon discover that the standard account of Jeff Bezos and the hype surrounding the creation of Amazon is just another fabricated story which falls apart under closer inspection. Amazon was not a company started by a hard-working college graduate who sold second-hand books out the back of his car. Rather, It is a company which was designed by an elite futuristic hedge fund that used game theory and complicated computer algorithms to predict the trends of the coming digital age. We can now trace the real founding of Amazon and the creation of the Bezos myth. D.E. Shaw and Co., the digital corporation factory. David Elliott Shaw was the founder of a financial institution like no other. In Fortune magazine piece entitled Wall Street King Quant, David Shaw's secret formulas pile up money, now he wants a piece of the net. The reader of 1996, now over a quarter of a century ago, was told, D. Shaw is the most intriguing and mysterious force on Wall Street today. Truer words may never have been spoken because what was happening behind the closed doors of Shaw's Manhattan-based enterprise was a new and mostly unexplored form of financial prophecy. The folks at D.E. Shaw and Co. were using complex mathematical models to predict what kind of digital platforms were most likely to become the dominant forces in the imminent internet era, with the hedge fund conspiring to seed some of the biggest early tech companies into being. These newly formed companies would have a massive competitive head start, and they were planning to utilize that advantage so that they could eventually dominate and, in time, monopolize some of the largest potential markets which the internet was currently expected to create, expected to create over the following decades. The company which Shaw had founded was unlike most financial institutions of its day. The atmosphere was calm and relaxed. There were no crazy-eyed traders screaming into phones as one might expect to see at a typical Wall Street company of the era. Shaw's was a place where small rooms full of newly recruited graduates tracked computer screens and talked quietly on their phones. This calm focus seemed even more out of place when we consider that Shaw's trading volume during the mid-90s was sometimes equal to 5% of the total volume of the New York Stock Exchange. This was far from a normal financial institution in many different ways. It had been created in 1988 by Shaw, with the company having its first premises above a small communist bookshop in a less desirable part of New York City before being installed in a new, more permanent setting in Manhattan skyscraper soon afterwards. Shaw had founded his new company with $28 million given by the Tisch family and Paloma partners, who were both heavily linked to the U.S. Democratic Party. Shaw, a Californian by upbringing, was a Stanford alumna, but this business venture was not his first time out east. He had previously been a professor in computer science at the prestigious Columbia University. Like many New York-based hedge funds, D.E. Shaw and Co. was predictably tight-lipped about its investments, but its employees were renowned for being especially secretive, even for a big financial organization. Shaw was a pioneer in quantitative investing, with his focus on developing sophisticated computer programs to identify and profit from anomalies in the market. Institutional investors released an article entitled The Power of Six in 2009, which made mention of D. Shaw's infamous company secrecy. The author, Michael Peltz, observes, few hedge fund firms have a more well-deserved reputation for secrecy than D.E. Shaw and Co. Like Coca-Cola Company, which zealously guards the formula for its prized syrup, D.E. Shaw has always vigilantly protected its proprietary trading algorithms. So secretive was the firm during the first few years of its trading that some employees didn't even tell their family where they worked, let alone what they were doing there. One of the employees who worked at this sophisticated hedge fund during the company's primordial development was to become one of the richest men in the world around a decade later, the supposed founder of Amazon, Jeff Bezos. Bezos had studied electrical engineering and computer science at New Jersey's Princeton University, graduating with highest honors and receiving his bachelor's degree in 1986. 2 years before D.E. Shaw and Co. had been founded, Bezos briefly worked for Fittel, a company which linked financial traders worldwide with financial organizations. After Fittel, Bezos took a job at Bankers Trust. It was 4 years after graduating that Bezos managed to land an interview with a relatively new company on Wall Street scene, D.E. Shaw and Co. The hedge fund, which Shaw had created, recruited its staff in a different manner than many of its competitors. Instead of hiring people to fit a specific role, Shaw's executives were hunting down those whom they saw as being the most intelligent and were then placing the successful candidate into the most appropriate position available. After interviewing Bezos, a partner of Shaw's told his boss that Jeff was likely to make someone a lot of money someday. David Shaw soon arranged to meet Bezos in person and, after their initial encounter, described him as having an unusual balance between intellect and creativity, finding the future Amazon boss to be friendly and enthusiastic. The world was on the cusp of an epochal shift, and Jeff Bezos had found himself in the right place at the most opportune moment. Employed alongside Bezos at D. Shaw was Halsey Minor, who was also go on to found one of the monopolizing internet sites of the future, the software download site CNET, which worked together while working together at D. Shaw. Minor and Bezos collaborated on projects to create a news by fax service, and although that eventually proved unsuccessful, the project did lead to Bezos being made the youngest ever senior vice president at D. Shaw Hedge Fund. By 1990, he had even taken charge of the company. Bezos left D. E. Shaw in 1994 to found Amazon, and in that same year he began building up the account for public consumption on how his supposed creation came to be. Finding Bezos. Once it had become clear that Jeff Bezos and Amazon were a great success, the backstory about his rise to power began to be forged. A year after Bezos had been made Time Magazine Person of the Year, Virginia Brackett's book called simply Jeff Bezos was published by Chelsea House Publishers as part of a series entitled Latinos in the Limelight. The collection featured Jeff Bezos alongside America's most sought-after Hispanic patronages of the era, with some of the other subjects of the series, including or being Antonio Banderas, Jennifer Lopez, Ricky Martin, and Christina Aguilera. When one first comes across this book, it may come as a surprise to discover that Jeff Bezos is billed as a Latino. In fact, Bezos was legally adopted by his mother's second husband, Mike Bezos, with Brackett's book stating Mike Bezos officially adopted Jeff, who in turn chose to adopt Mike's Cuban heritage, with the author going on to observe. This closeness has caused some reports to mistakenly identify Mike as Jeff's birth father. Mike Bezos had originally immigrated as part of Operación Pedro Pan, which saw more than 14,000 children, unaccompanied minors in today's parlance, sent to live in the US without their parents, as noted by Jennifer Landau in a book entitled Jeff Bezos and Amazon. The latter book also makes note of Bezos's ostensible awakenings to the internet's massive growth while he was employed at Shaw's hedge fund. While researching the internet at D.E. Shaw, Bezos discovered a startling statistic. Web usage was increasing at an incredible rate of 2,300% a year. Bezos knew that anything growing that fast a rate might seem invisible to people one day, but could be everywhere the next. In truth, there was not much startling about the discovery. Bezos was senior vice president, a uniquely positioned hedge fund created by the King of Quant, and the firm was proactively focused on capitalizing the internet's most powerful emerging markets. This had been what D.E. Shaw had gone into business to do in the first place. Finding Mrs. Bezos. While discussing Bezos' time at D.E. Shaw, the aforementioned biographer Virginia Brackett also reveals that this is where Bezos met his future wife, a colleague named Mackenzie Tuttle. Like all of D.E. Shaw's employees, Mackenzie had been carefully selected and then placed into position where her potential seemed best suited. Like Bezos, Mackenzie had graduated from Princeton and had previously served as an assistant to Toni Morrison, a powerful authoress who was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1993. That same year, 1993, Mackenzie and Jeff married, and it is around this point in the timeline that the public story behind the rise of Bezos becomes carefully crafted. Landau helps keeps Bezos' myth alive in chapter 3 of her recounting of the Amazon law. Like many New Yorkers, Jeff and Mackenzie Bezos didn't own a car, so they flew to Texas over the 4th of July weekend of 1994 to get an old Chevy Blazer from his parents. On the way home, Mackenzie took on most of the driving so that her husband could write out a 30-page business plan for his new company. The narrative being seeded was of an unprepared, newlywed couple having to buy a second-hand car from their parents to set up a business. However, in reality, this was a case of a high-flying former hedge fund senior vice president and his wife who had insider insight and were about to create a monopolizing company. Brackett's book may raise eyebrows in its aim of heroically retelling the rise of Jeff Bezos, but it does reveal some pertinent facts. Jeff Bezos did not actually leave D.E. Shaw and then set up Amazon. In fact, the company began to be formed while Bezos was still senior vice president at the hedge fund, Brackett writes. When Jeff explained to David Shaw his desire to begin his project, the boss understood. He recognized in Jeff his own desire to accomplish things yet untried. In this part of the backstory, the Bezoses turn to their relatives and cadge $300,000 to invest in an unknown startup in return for a 6% stake, which, to the wonderment of all parties, turns into billions within a few years. Finding the myth. Many books have been published over the past 25 years which depict the same Jeff saga, often using the same wording and imagery, and each maintaining the same narrative. Tom Robinson's Jeff Bezos, Amazon.com architect, Stuart A. Callan's Jeff Bezos and Amazon, Joseph Sherman's Jeff Bezos, King of Amazon, the two aforementioned works by Brackett and Landau. All of these books were written from the same template, each of them veritable puff piece, which have been used to construct a tightly coherent narrative around the creation of Amazon. If you were to believe the official backstory, which has been built around the founding of the most powerful company on earth, you'd probably believe that in 1994, a bedraggled Bezos, dressed in hand-me-down clothes, in need of a loan from his friends and family, was having to sell books from the back of his parents' station wagon estate car to make his dream come true. Actually, Bezos was very wealthy already, with an abundance of lucrative experience and support gleaned from one of the most successful and distinctive hedge funds in history, topped by the priceless foreknowledge of the coming internet era. As previously mentioned, Bezos set up Amazon at around the same time that his hedge fund colleague, Halsey Minor, set up CNET, with each of them soon monopolizing their selected markets, his selected market. Within 5 years, Jeff Bezos had been accoladed with the title of Time Magazine's Man of the Year, and he was attracting a lot of attention. At the same time, Bezos was becoming a household name. He also began to look for other areas in which to expand his flourishing enterprise, as well as an opportunities to invest the vast wealth he was generating. Bezos was so confident in the future of Amazon that he had invited his family members to purchase shares in his future company. This also helped to create an idealized mom and pop origin story for a business which was to become the cyber Goliath and the leading online retailer, with all the competition struggling to play catch up as Bezos's beast became an almost perfect monopoly in an emerging sector. The picture painted of Jeff Bezos is one of a young independent entrepreneur who stumbled upon a new niche of online book selling as the route to becoming a billionaire. In reality, an already wealthy Jeff Bezos was placed into a position of dominance by a decidedly futuristic hedge fund. In this very special enterprise, large swathes of the internet were bought up before most people even understood the concept of something as basic as an email. This kind of foresight may seem almost indistinguishable from magic for some, but the wizardry was of a numerical order. The last 3 decades of the previous millennium were filled with enterprising mathematicians who were busy capitalizing on emerging markets, which were only just being envisioned. Jeff Bezos was selected to run one of the main internet monopolies, which the mavens at D.E. Shaw and Co. foresaw arriving in the near future, during a time when the internet was still just a twinkle in the eye of its creator. D.E. Shaw's influence and the real internet revolution. What is extremely notable about the development of D.E. Shaw and Co. is the close political connections that the company and its founder had with the US Democratic Party in general and the Clintons in particular. In 1986, Shaw left Columbia University to join Morgan Stanley and Co., becoming vice president there for automated analytical trading technology. Soon, he had formed D.E. Shaw and Co. as a separate entity, and by 1992, he was also becoming heavily involved in US politics. When Bill Clinton was running for federal office, Shaw became central to the would-be president's plan to reform the US Commerce Department. In 1992, Shaw wrote a white paper for Clinton which mapped out his proposed reform program. In August 1993, Shaw also donated $50,000 in what was termed soft money to the Democratic National Committee. But these were not the only funds which Shaw would go on to give the DNC and its affiliates. Over the course of Clinton's two-term presidency, Shaw actually donated over $700,000 in soft and hard funds to the governing Democrats. Only 4 months after his initial $50,000 donation to the DNC, Shaw participated in the Clinton-Gore Economic Conference, which took place in Clinton's home turf of Little Rock, Arkansas, discussing investments in new technologies. In January 1993, the same month that Jeffrey Epstein was invited into the nascent Clinton White House, Shaw recommended increasing the funding for technology research, reforming the US patent system, and several other policies which he claimed would foster technological innovation and increase American economic competitiveness. In November 1993, still in his first year of office, Clinton signed an executive order which established the President's Committee of Advisors on Science and Technology, PCAST, a private sector advisory group. which was to advise the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. On the 4th of August 1994, Shaw was one of the 19 members appointed to PCAST. Out of the 19 appointed, 8 had contributed either to Clinton's campaign, Gore's campaign, or the Democratic Party. It was around this time that Jeff Bezos left D.E. Shaw to form Amazon. David Shaw's activity advising the Clinton administration did not end in 1994. In fact, Shaw was advising Clinton, Gore, and the DNC on various matters throughout the Clinton presidency. By 1998, D.E. Shaw and Co. had become a success story, with much of the meat and bones behind the public face still veiled in mystery. The runaway success of its mysterious and complicated dealings had often induced journalists and mainstream media outlets to detach themselves from reality and become overly positive in covering this powerful and well-connected hedge fund. However, D. Shaw and Co.'s era of positive spin was beginning to hit the buffers. The New York Times journalist Joseph Kahn wrote in an article on the 21st of July 1998 entitled "The Quantitative Leap: Investing by Numbers Doesn't Offer a Great Edge," which began with a rhetorical question. Put some of the world's smartest math scholars together with the fastest computers, give them a wealth of historical data and a few $1 billion. Do they have a chance of predicting swings in the stock market? The article investigated the supposed success of D.E. Shaw in particular. After much consideration of whether Shaw and his employees had been completely successful and whether quantitative trading was quite all it had been made out to be, the conclusion of the article seems to sum up the reality of the situation aptly, with a quantitative strategist named Edgar Peters being quoted as stating, "The idea of some holy grail strategy that works a majority of the time is nice, but it is just a dream. If anyone could really predict the market with any degree of reliability, the market would die." It was soon evident that D. Shaw and Co.'s techniques were not as reliable as many had made them out to be. The massive amount of money was about to be lost as the quant bubble finally burst. D.E. Shaw and Co. was a hedge fund like nothing which had ever existed before, and by 1998 its staff had also made themselves too big to fail behemoth. Shaw had managed to build a hedged bond portfolio through the Bank of America, which included $10 billion in US Treasury securities as well as $4 billion in Japanese bonds. In 1997, the bank lent $1.4 billion to D.E. Shaw and Co. However, as a Los Angeles Times article in October 1998 describes, wild swings in the market worldwide caused severe trading loss for many such hedge funds with large leveraged bets on stocks and bonds. The bank's original loan to D.E. Shaw and Co. was unsecured, leaving the Bank of America to take the financial hit, a $372 million write-down. No matter the losses, D. Shaw and Co. still managed to hold on to its capital of $47.3 billion, with assets at the time totaling $600 billion. By December 1998, it was being reported that D. Shaw and Co. was cutting its workforce just before the Christmas holidays. Quantitative ending. When Tim Berners-Lee first announced the creation of the World Wide Web on Usenet in 1991, the digital world which D.E. Shaw and Co. had already mapped out in detail became possible for the first time. Within 3 years, Shaw's recruits were beginning to create companies which his hedge fund's complicated confidential computer algorithms had predicted to have the greatest potential of becoming internet monopolies. David Shaw and his unique enterprise had mapped out the coming internet revolution in great detail by using game theory and computer modeling. And it was through this technique that David Shaw's team was able to clandestinely to map out the development of such a brand new paradigm shift in technology as the internet, and then to capitalize on that foreknowledge. Jeff Bezos and many of his associates at D.E. Shaw and Co. were arguably part of the biggest caper ever to take place in human history. Within the space of 30 years, the majority of the world's biggest companies were to be trading on the internet, and everything from food to entertainment was to be offered online. Shaw's team of internet privateers ensured that there were no equal opportunity available to those developing their businesses in this new online realm. They had predicted monopolies forming during the internet age, and instead of allowing the average entrepreneur or business person to fight it out on an even keel, Shaw's employees began determinedly taking over the online world. D.E. Shaw and Company's monopolization of the digital realm created hyper-centralized pockets of digital power and saw a new era of cyber authoritarianism come one step closer to being made manifest. It wasn't only Jeff Bezos and Halsey Minor who cut their teeth at Shaw's secretive company. There are some others, very significant former employees of D.E. Shaw and Co., who have continued to make waves themselves. John Overdeck left the hedge fund and created Two Sigma Investments, another New York-based hedge fund following in the footsteps of Shaw in more ways than one. Whereas in the past, D.E. Shaw and Company became pioneers in using computer modeling to predict trends, Two Sigma Investments is pioneering the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning to create its own trading strategies. Overdeck wasn't just managing director at D.E. Shaw and Company, he was also vice president at Amazon. Others who have been employed at D. Shaw include Trey Beck, described in a CNBC article as a philanthropist and major Democratic Party financier. That article states, Beck, who's managing director at investment firm D. Shaw, has given the Democrat-aligned groups for years. He made five-figure donations to the Democratic National Committee, the Senate Majority PAC, and the Priorities USA Action. Shaw's forethought had allowed him to make some keen investments that were only possible because of his almost precognitive understanding of the vast opportunities which the coming internet era would bring. D. Shaw and Co. had made a pile of money quietly, but by January 2005, it was being reported that the hedge fund was losing its ability to continue doing business in the shadows. For 6 years, for 6 years and more after it lost such a vast amount of Bank America's money in the glare of publicity, D. Shaw and Co. had been relying on a loophole in U.S. security laws to keep trading in secret. But the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, lifted the firm's confidentiality in December 2004. D. Shaw and Co.'s ability to stay under the radar allowed their hedge fund to remain mysterious and, as with Bezos and Amazon, had added to the mythos surrounding the company. In fact, D. Shaw and Co. had made most of its money early on by betting big on the coming internet era. And such a lucrative opportunity may have fated Shaw's hedge fund to peak prematurely. Shaw himself, perhaps sensing this, left the life of the hedge fund magnate and began looking for the next lucrative project. Although he had capitalized on what may have seemed like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity with his early investment in the internet revolution, he was still very capable of calculating where the big opportunity was likely to come. In 2001, David Shaw began to remove himself from the day-to-day running of D. Shaw and Co., a process which was completed over the following year. and he instead began concentrating his efforts on a new emerging market with the potential to produce both paradigm shift in technologies and massive returns to investments. In 2001, Shaw created D.E. Shaw Research, where he became chief scientist and moved into full-time scientific research in computational biochemistry. Staying in New York City, he also became an adjunct professor of biomedical informatics at Columbia Medical School, as well as a senior research fellow at Columbia's Center for Computational Biology and Bioinformatics, C2B2. In 2002, D.E. Shaw, 2022, sorry, D.E. Shaw Research, listed as Des Res, announced that it was entering an exclusive global licensing agreement with pharmaceutical colossus Eli Lilly. In a Financial Times article cheekily entitled Farmer Bro David Shaw stated that the deal was for the clinical development and commercialization of a DesRes company of KV1.3 targeted therapeutics for the treatment of various immunological and inflammatory diseases. From Shaw's investment over that last 2 decades, it is clear that he believes the market with the potential for the greatest growth in the future will be the biomedical sector, a fact that many people already recognize all too well. Jeff Bezos has come a long way since he was supposedly modestly selling books out the back of his parents' car, yet none of us is ever likely to know how far, nor hear the real story behind his rise to power. Instead, the truth about the rise of Jeff Bezos, we are fed Instead, sorry, of the truth about the rise of Jeff Bezos, we are fed a scripted version of history which is sterile and patronizing, a story which was likely contrived in the secretive offices of D.E. Shaw and Co. during the early 90s. Soon, if the techno despots are allowed to continue taking complete control, all we'll be left with are their tall tales, presented to us as a simple package, and none of us will know what we don't know. In that world of embellished narrative, all those who have grappled their way aloft monopolies such as Amazon will be heroes. There you go. And it's very pertinent. It's very important. It's very timely, really, because the same things happened with, of course, um, Elon Musk. Like I say, you can read that UK column. You can find the links of it over on Newspaste, either drop down articles. Sometimes these articles will be found on the front pages by here, like here. You can find them in the other articles section, or if you scroll down, some of these articles appear elsewhere too. And of course, it's fun. This is newspaper we're looking at now. That's another one I wrote for UK column, which is about Pablo Miller down here. Pablo Miller and the people working alongside the real James Bond. But back to what I was saying. This is very timely, prescient, you could say. I think it's probably the correct terminology, because Elon Musk is being treated as this great hero with this mythos that has been created behind him. And the myth of Elon Musk works really well for PR. These guys have, of course, got these guys are the richest guys in the world. They've got massive PR teams, and the PR teams do most of their work for them. And out of the other side, loads of people go, they're heroes, they're heroes, they've done heroic things, they've done the best things. But they haven't really, what they've done is created stories that make them seem like even more of heroes. But they were um, lucky enough to be the people who the top guys decided would front these operations. You know, when D. Shaw set up his hedge fund, he was looking to create something where the people who he would employ would go into different areas and different sectors, and they would make extra money from that. But I get a feeling there was extra control. It wasn't just DE Shaw alone. It wasn't just for the benefit of DE Shaw. It was for the benefit of a hidden hand, in my opinion, some form of state actor that would be making lots of money off the rise of the internet, off the rise of people like Jeff Bezos, off the rise of Amazon. And when these things happen, they are kind of cheats because they know something is coming before we do, and they completely and utterly co-opt every part of it before we even get there. And that's telling of our society right now. They had to create a myth about how Jeff Bezos came to own so much because people would complain, people would be angry, they would be like, well, he got given that, where, who gave it to him, why was he able? Why was he different than everybody else? Why does everybody else lose out on the opportunity for a fair internet that isn't monopolized by one major company? But that was what was seen as being the future, and that's what they intended to do. Well, we're all shuffling around playing Monopoly with our families back in the late 80s and early 90s. They're creating monopolies and destroying small enterprises, and a lot of the potential that the internet had to be a great leveler was taken away very quickly. And Jeff Bezos did that. Jeff Bezos, many others, and then of course Jeff Bezos goes into this is very, very interesting as well. You think about the people who created these big companies, the people who were there at the start, people like in Google, like Eric Schmidt, Sergey Brin, and others. People like Elon Musk for SpaceX, Tesla, and now X. People like Sean Parker for Spotify, Facebook, Thiel's Founders Fund, and other things. People like Jeff Bezos for Amazon. They were all members of Edge. And as you'll know from Musk and Epstein and the Third Culture dossier, you know that the people who were involved in being trained by people like Richard Thaler in psychological manipulation of the masses were all of these people who were basically placed into top positions of what would be the digital monopolies that would create the digital panopticon around us. And that's what's happening. These guys, they've created our world for us, and we get to experience it secondhand. We get just the dregs, the scraps. We have to fight for the little bottom bits. We have to fight to be able to be given enough money by people like Amazon by selling our wares through them. And they make masses of money. They keep taking our money off us. They keep taking our potential off us. They keep taking our opportunities away from us by co-opting it beforehand. So, like I say, this is prescient. Jeff Bezos was involved in more than just Amazon. Afterwards, he involved in Edge. He tried to create a few other things, but really, a lot of what he did is side projects, like the Amazon Sotheby's thing. It didn't work. He didn't have David Shaw behind him. He didn't have computer algorithms behind him by the time he got up to the late 90s and early noughties. Instead, he was just living off the billions that this had gave him, that this had given him. And why not if you got that much money? And that was an article that I wrote about D.E. Shaw. I think it was probably produced in 2022. I think, through UK Column, and I thank UK Column for hosting the article. Um, it's a really interesting one, and there's more to learn from it as well, more to understand. One of the interesting things is the links with Clinton, etc. These guys, it was a democratic, the technological pioneers and technological world was created by Democrats. This is a fact. The Democratic Party had their fingers in those pies very much so. Republicans were very late to the party. And in a sense, that technology was going to turn into the technocracy, and that technocracy was going to overtake the Republican Party. You look at the Republican Party now, Elon Musk was a Democrat. RFK Jr. was a Democrat. Tulsi Gabbard was a Democrat. Donald Trump was a Democrat. Do you see a running theme? The fact is, those who take power, make wealth, get the opportunities like this, they will get into power and they will then keep everybody out. And they will create their own, they don't have any allegiances. They don't have any idea. They'll tell you what they need to tell you at the time to then become richer and more powerful. Anyway, it's probably that. That's D. Shaw and the Rise of Jeff Bezos. You can find it, like I say, on Newspaste or UK Column. You can find the direction to UK Column through Newspaste anyway. And please read more. I need your help. I need your support. If you want to support my work, then please help me out. I really do need your help with this sort of stuff. I can't, I don't get paid hardly anything for writing an article like that. And then when it's out, is part of the ether, and I rely on people who are supporting me via Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee or Ko-Fi or things like that to be able to afford to live. So please, I will do more. If I can make a normal everyday, like not even a big wage, just a normal everyday wage, you will see my productivity going boom, boom, boom. I'll just be able to concentrate on work, and that's what I really want to do. I want to get up to a point where I can just concentrate on doing the projects and write the articles that need to be written, the stories that need to be told to give us a better perspective about what's going on. So please come to newspace.com, support my work, become a Patreon, buy me a coffee, whatever it takes, help me out. Other than that, I'll see you later. Thanks for being with me. Bye.
Shaping a great reset for the post-corona era.